Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. Allow me to congratulate and thank the Honourable Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, as well as his entire team for the preparation and presentation of this budget in a particularly volatile context where the global economy is being shaken by headwinds from multiple quarters. And I shall indulge the person who intervened, the honourable member who intervened right before me, Honourable Until, reflected earlier during her intervention that she does not understand. And I think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the answer lies in her own statement. She clearly does not understand anything. And contrary to what I can very gently term as the crano-rectally inverted comments of that honourable member, Honourable Until stipulated or purported earlier that I spent 3 days in Dubai, where I actually only spent 2 days, and I went there on work purposes, and I came back with results, alors que Enatia sommé l'Afrique and did not actually want to come back. I should remind her, she found some other. Mais bon, it might have been a blessing for all of us who have amounted to good riddance to bad rubbish. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I am not going to, I don't even think it requires rebutting or refuting because, like I said, she admitted herself, the honourable member earlier on, that she does not understand anything. We'll leave it to that. The less I say about it, the better for her, actually. I recall earlier on Honourable Shakil Mohammed, who clearly considers himself to be the only person under the sun to be able to interpret or understand an act of law. But what his theatrics earlier on demonstrated, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is that he's using his legal knowledge to actually mislead the population. We know, the House knows, the population knows, that spouting half-truths, half-baked truth, is his usual modus operandi, and unfortunately for him, and I shall point out how, unfortunately for him, it has led him nowhere except achieving yet another level of ridicule. Allow me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to quote that at page 73 of the budget speech, paragraph 457, it is stipulated, and I quote, "We're extending the basic widow pension to Muslim widows through tardy registration of religious marriage before the Muslim Family Council," end of quote. What did the honourable member go on to say to the House and to allude to the population? That in 1991, it was only under the leadership of the MMM that this was attempted to be corrected. What Honourable Shakil Mohammed conveniently, and I must say deliberately, omitted to say that the Muslim Family Council was set up in 1991 and the Prime Minister then was the late Sir Anirudh Jagnat. So let's make no mistake about this. I would invite him to stop ambulating himself as a communal little demon and refrain from casting doubts.
Order. Wait.
Withdraw.
I withdraw.
Order.
I did withdraw.
Order.
I withdraw.
This is a point of order. Now.
I withdraw.
Withdraw yourself.
Order.
Who are you to tell me to withdraw myself?
Order. I understand it's been withdrawn. The C and D, them and whatever. It's withdrawn.
It It is. Thank you.
Sure. And I hope you understand, I'm the one who regulates the chambers. And I did quite well, I think. Allow me to do it. When there is going to be something, I don't need anybody to direct me toward what I have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker,
Please
sir,
continue.
for maintaining your position as the chair of this August Assembly. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, with the uncertainties lying behind the Ukraine and the Russia war, our economic risks have risen sharply and our policy trade-offs have become even more challenging, like canvassed earlier on by the honourable members on this side of the House, and this has created disruptions in the smooth running of all sectors and daily livelihoods, and it has had a detrimental effect on the cost of living of the entire world's population. This, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is a direct result of the effect of a war between two huge producer countries of essential commodities, an effect that we have witnessed has slashed across the global supply chain landscape with an alarming speed. But this government spirit has not been dampened by these difficulties, and it is really daring of the government to come up with such a citizen-centric budget, or I should say more aptly, a budget for the most vulnerable ones. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we must acknowledge that the measures in this budget would not have been possible had they not received the support of the Prime Minister, to whom I wish to hereby express my gratitude to have decided on paying a particular attention to those who are at the bottom rungs of the ladder and who have unfortunately been hit harder than anybody else. Today, concerning the management of the pandemic, we are cited as an example throughout the world. And most importantly, we are praised by competent authorities in the way we dealt with the unprecedented sanitary catastrophe. We are, Mr. Speaker, sir, the only African country to have started vaccination of our citizens as from their 5th birthday. These, Mr. Speaker, sir, are exceptional milestones in the tenure of the Prime Ministership of the Honourable Pravin Kumar Jagnnath. Unprecedented situations, we agree, but we bring exceptional results too. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, perhaps we could have done better and faster had this opposition been collaborative during times of national crisis. As we have kick-started these budgetary debates today, it is an opportune time to remember the unfortunate but customary demagogy of the members of the other side of the House. And allow me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to refresh the memories of both the House and the population concerning these demagogy. When the government decided to close our borders to protect the health of our citizens, some self-proclaimed patriots branded such a decision as a spectre of doomsday for our people. This did not, however, deter our Prime Minister from taking what could possibly amount to the hardest and the boldest decision as a statesman, that of shutting down our borders to safeguard public health. And the population will also remember the never-ending soap opera series, on dirait un interminable feuilleton. And I'm here referring to when we secured vaccine for our population, thanks to the gargantuan effort of the government and its good diplomatic relations. Ça aussi, l'opposition, pas en trouve bon. They went on discouraging the public from getting vaccinated, using baseless arguments about the quality of the vaccine. And when that did not work, these same grands patriotes de l'autre côté de la chambre, they tried unsuccessfully to créer une polémique, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, over consent forms. And I say unsuccessfully because all their coups bas, like we've witnessed lately in the intervention of Honourable Mohamed and Honourable Anctil, their coups bas, their below-the-belt attack, their politique de bas étage, their desperate attempts at instilling fear in the population, Il y a un autre problème que nous déjà une préoccupation. Their maneuvers, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, did not convince the majority of our people. I repeat the word unsuccessful, because nothing has worked for them so far. It didn't work because we have an intelligent population, a population that can demarcate right from wrong, a population that recognizes the right leadership that the country needs, that of Honorable Pravin Kumar Jagnnath. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, en 2019, la population mauricienne a choisi de placer sa confiance en notre Premier ministre, et cette même population continue de le faire aujourd'hui encore, alors que nous faisons face à des situations économiques et sanitaires mondiales exceptionnelles. This budget, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is for the population, for our people, nothing more and nothing less. But the population and us, members on this side of the House, we are prepared, once again, to patiently sit down and listen, obviously in the spirit of parliamentary democracy, and with our usual soupçon of indulgence, we will listen to the same rhetoric. La même rengaine, augmentation pas assez, budget pas bon, budget confetti, élection triquée, budget réchauffé, the same rhetoric, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, and perhaps here, my colleague, the honourable member, the Minister of Health, could choose to investigate this non pas bon syndrome. And should there be a vaccine on the market for this syndrome? On this side of the House, we undertake to fast-track the procurement of such vaccines, and we undertake to administer them to you, those in need, free of charge, gratuit. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, when the world was on its knees, when our population, our economy, our welfare was in a precarious position, how did this opposition help in any way? Allow me to try and enumerate leurs grands actes patriotiques. Fait tam-tam devant la cour, devant le Parlement. Fait la marche gauche-droite, ben la marche sans destination. Go slow pour protester. Pris l'essence, incitation à des actes irresponsables, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, all of these backfired lamentably upon them. And this reste pour écouter dire qui Pravin Jagnnath les mêmes derrière la guerre, l'Ukraine et la Russie. But luckily, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, except for a handful few, the majority of our people are very well informed of what is happening in the world and understand that the economic situation is not limited to our country only, as some are desperately trying to faire croire. At this juncture, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, it is important to recall the introductory remarks of the Honourable Minister of Finance, Dr. Padarachi, to this current budget, and I quote, "This government has introduced the wage assistance scheme and the self-employed assistance scheme, which benefited 542,000 workers and self-employed to preserve employment, representing 27.3 billion rupees. This government has paid the pension at 9,000 rupees to some 302,000 beneficiaries to preserve the purchasing power of the elderly and the vulnerable. This government has subsidized essential products to the tune of 5.2 billion rupees. This government has increased the minimum wage from 10,200 to 11,075 rupees. This government has paid salary compensation to employees of SMEs. This government has provided a moratorium on the repayment of capital of loans. This government has paid allocated billions to support businesses. Our response package has enabled us to avoid massive layoff of hundreds of thousands of people and avoiding economic bankruptcy and social chaos." And I end the quote. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, let us just imagine more than 300,000 of our working class people losing their jobs. And if only we can spare 1 minute to imagine the amplitude of that crisis and the damaging effect it would have had on our people in our country, it is only then that we can appreciate what this government, under the leadership of our Prime Minister, has achieved. The Prime Minister, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, has once again beautifully demonstrated his mettle. And we're going to remember de l'autre côté pas de la chambre, heureusement. But on the other side, nous avons le grand donneur de leçons, M. Sitanen, who was on radio recently. Monsieur Sitanen, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I mean, this is the person who shall go down in history. He is always going to be remembered. We'll remember him for what? Les tirages du pain dans la bouche des enfants vulnérables. The introduction of additional stimulus package pour petits copains. The NRPT, the National Residential Property Tax, allow me to correct my honourable colleague, Minister Balgobin, on this. It's not remembered as Sitanen property tax, it's remembered as NRPT Navin Ramgoolam property tax at that time. Les taux d'impôt uniformes à 15%, mais quelle injustice, Monsieur le Vice-président. Mr. Ramasitanen is the last person to comment on this heavily social budget, and allow me to put this on record, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. Ramasitanen n'arrivera jamais à la cheville du docteur Padayachi en ce qui concerne la gestion de notre économie. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we care for our people in vulnerable situations. We do not say it, we do not come here and do theatrics. We mean it, and it is accompanied by solid actions. That is what our Prime Minister, our Minister of Finance, and this government stands for. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the MSM-led governments have always either inherited tough times or sailed through tough tides, be it under the leadership of late Saniro Jagnat or the leadership of Honourable Pravin Kumar Jagnat. The adversities faced by our Prime Minister consecutively during the pandemic and the war have been unprecedented and have given our people another opportunity to witness his leadership at its best. We need strong leadership, bold initiative, solidarity, and most importantly, a sense of patriotism during harsh times that our country and our nation is currently going through. I quote, "With the people and for the people," end of quote. This is the philosophy that drives this budget. Anyone who suffers the most will obtain some relief in this budget. No one should be and no one has been left behind, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. This government has introduced a panoply of measures that touches and reduces the burden of every single Mauritian of our Republic by ensuring that essential products are and remain accessible to the population. Different significant avenues of job opportunities are explored. Access to decent housing remains a priority. I remember somebody referring to the number of social housing that has been achieved by this government. I think they should try and look into their own track record before talking about the achievement of this government during such difficult economic times. There's also the abolition of the municipal tax, and concerning this tax, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, allow me to refute some of the frivolous arguments of the opposition. Abolition of this tax was part of our electoral manifesto in 2019, and we are very proud that it is being executed in this budget. I remind the House that there are some 110,000 households who will benefit from this unprecedented measure. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, while the social aspects of the current budget are undeniably the right ones, we should also understand that in this budget the government has paid particular attention to two key sectors of our national strategy for sustainable development, namely the agricultural sector, to ensure our food security and the circular economy to make maximum use of our natural resources while adding value to waste. The honourable member who spoke before me, again, aptly demonstrating that she does not understand anything, was requesting explanations from the Honourable Minister of Food Security and Agriculture about the measures, how he's going to enhance production, processing, conservation of our local agricultural produce. I mean, clearly she has not been paying any attention to the budget speech of the Honourable Minister of Food Security and Agro Industry. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, in view of ensuring our food security, the government has introduced a series of measures to enhance our production. And I have no doubt that my colleague, Honourable Manish Gobin, is the right person to lead this critical national priority. Enormous emphasis has also been laid on the development of our green economy, which is yet another priority which this government is giving attention to. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to additionally express my delight for my constituents of constituency number 7 that the requests of the 3 elected members, myself, Honourable Manish Gobin, Honourable Rajana Dalia, have been positively taken into consideration. The 2022-2023 budget provides for the construction of a Mediclinic at Rivière-du-Remport. To better face flash floods, the constituency will benefit from some 293 million rupees under the National Flood Management Programme. A new incinerator will be made available, and additionally, some SMEs will benefit from a fruit ripening cluster at Rivière-du-Remport. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, allow me at this juncture to also elaborate on how the measures and budgetary allocations contained in this budget speech will bring value to the various policy interventions of my ministry. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, without the role and contribution of women, the nation would not have reached where it is today. Members of this House will recall that the Honourable Prime Minister launched the National Gender Policy 2022-2030 in the context of the International Women's Day on the 8th of March this year, and the Honourable Member who spoke before me, the 4th member, made reference that nothing has been done since the launching of this policy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, either she is complètement à côté de la plaque comme d'habitude and does not understand what it undertakes to implement a policy, a national paper, or she has just not been following the progress made with the technical working groups and the National Steering Committee for Gender Mainstreaming. The National Gender Policy 2022-2030, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, provides a framework for collective actions among all key stakeholders, and it goes without saying that gender would undoubtedly cut across all the policies and programs of various ministries and stakeholders. I look forward to fruitful engagements with the gender focal points at the level of the National Steering Committee on Gender Mainstreaming, which I personally chair, and I extend my appreciation to the Minister of Finance and by extension to the Prime Minister for allocating under the Resilience Fund the following provisions: sustainable women entrepreneurship, women empowerment support, revamping of our community centres into family and community welfare centres, 3 of which is already underway. Honourable Anctil will be happy to note that of Gokula, Saint-Aubin and Saint-Pierre. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, today there's a consensus from various quarters that this budget has been conceived whilst bearing in mind the reality of the ground. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, again, one of the members who spoke before me made allusion of our aging population. And I would like to highlight that this budget has made provision to the tune of 15 million rupees for the creation of 4, not 1, but 4 fertility clinics to be set up at the level of regional hospitals. This example is a clear testimony that the Minister of Finance has been far-sighted in addressing the issue of fertility treatments, because if it is not addressed on time, it is likely to impact significantly on our population dynamics in the long run. So saying or purporting that nothing is being done to address our women who face difficulties in conceiving, or the aging population and demographics are not being addressed, is clearly misleading the population and the House. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, women's economic empowerment remains one of the key pillars of any, not just ours, of any sustainable development. While acknowledging that progress is being made, we also recognize that there's room for improvement as regards to the economic empowerment of our women. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, it is high time that the National Women Entrepreneur Council be recognized as the entity that brings together well-established as well as aspiring women entrepreneurs who operate in the micro, the small and medium enterprises. It is precisely within this backdrop that my ministry, with the support of the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, is working on a national strategy for women entrepreneurship development in Mauritius, and with the aim of guiding my ministry on the legislative, institutional, policy dimensions that would be responsive to women's strategic needs, aspirations, thereby enlarging the scope of women entrepreneurship development in our republic. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, one of the members of the other side of the House criticized that why are we only targeting 50 potential women entrepreneurs for a training program. At least we're starting and we're heading in the right direction. God knows what has been happening in the 10, 14, 15 years that the other side were in power. The effective implementation of this measure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, will go a long way in not only empowering women economically, but will de facto contribute to enhancing their livelihoods and those of their families. I take this opportunity, considering all the arguments being thrown haphazardly out of desperation from the other side, I take this opportunity, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to reiterate my ministry's determination to keep moving on the journey on which it has embarked since I took over the portfolio of gender equality and family welfare in 2019. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, coming to our children, those who, again, a particular member purported that nothing has been done for them. Coming to our children, this government being a great proponent of their rights, of their development, of the protection of their welfare, the budget has given colossal attention in improving these very rights. And allow me to very humbly remind the House and the population and express my satisfaction that 2022 has marked a great turn in our legislative landscape with the introduction and proclamation of 3 historical pieces of legislation in favor of our children. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the additional relay center at Notre Dame, which is fully operational, but understandably, and as explained in various answers to various PQs, had some issues, but it is now fully operational. Residents who are aged between the age of 16 and 18 are going to benefit from a skills development program to enhance their employability. There are benefits of childcare services, which are obviously not limited to children's development, but also extend to good quality, affordable childcare, to have a positive impact on our women's economic inclusion and national productivity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the government has maintained the one-off cash grant of 500,000 rupees for upgrading of infrastructure of our existing child daycare centres in order to make them more conducive for the safety and the care of our children. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, as announced at paragraph 268 of the budget speech, my ministry will shortly introduce an adoption bill in the National Assembly to regulate both foreign and local adoption and give an opportunity to all children to grow up in a family environment. When it comes to domestic violence, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, it is a social scourge. We have acknowledged it, and it needs to be completely uprooted from our society. And might I again humbly remind the House and the population that the commitment to eliminate this scourge comes from the highest level of governance, with the Prime Minister himself chairing the high-level committee on the elimination of the gender-based violence. And before somebody from the other side of the House questions where is the progress, we have already started implementing the recommendations of the National Strategy and Action Plan to eliminate gender-based violence. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to highlight that at paragraph 270 in the budget speech, my ministry is about to set up the model shelter for women victims of domestic violence. We, the MSM-led government, will be implementing that. It's going to be situated at Rivière du Poste. And it is, again, in line with the recommendation of the National Strategy and Action Plan to combat domestic violence. And I hereby applaud my honourable colleague, the Minister of Finance, for this measure. To conclude, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the Honourable Minister of Finance has presented a social and inclusive budget which addresses the current socio-economic challenges. The government led by Honourable Pravin Jagnnath has not only lived up to the expectations of the population, but has actually exceeded those expectations. It is a budget rempli d'humanisme, a budget that fleshes out the contours of a roadmap to recovery, with particular emphasis on what is our greatest asset, our most valuable treasure, and that is our people. This budget is for them, for the people. I will end with a few words which I took the liberty of pinching from my honourable colleague, l'Honourable Manish Gobin, and I quote, "Tough times do not last, tough people do. We are tough and we shall last." With these words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I again congratulate the Prime Minister and the Honourable Minister of Finance, Dr. Padachi, for masterminding and executing this audacious and well-timed budget 2022-2023. Long live the Republic of Mauritius. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. We'll break for 30 minutes.